Today we're going to talk about some good polling news for Biden ahead of November, and I interview the host of Strict Scrutiny, Leah Litman, about all of the cases that Trump is contending with right now, from New York to Georgia to Florida, as well as the Supreme Court looking into the question of presidential immunity. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So for the first time in the better part of a year, Decision Desk HQ's polling average, they're a great polling firm, has Biden narrowly leading Trump 45% to 44.9%. So certainly not some runaway victory for Joe, to be clear, but if we're looking at momentum less than 6 months out from Election Day, that is clearly in Joe Biden's favor. Granted, I do have to note that in the same polling average, Trump is still narrowly leading in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, so it's an uphill climb for sure. But again, if we're looking at momentum and the way it's going, in that case, I would rather be Biden than Trump. But here's why I think the momentum is going to continue to go in Biden's favor. First of all, the economy remains strong, and it also takes time for people to actually feel its effects. The stock market, for example, just hit record highs. People are going to look at their 401ks and recognize that. The economy added over 15 million jobs and counting. Unemployment's been below 4% for the longest stretch in half a century. We continue to outperform the rest of the G7 countries as far as our economic performance is concerned. Inflation's a bit sticky, but remains low. Wages are rising. This isn't the economy from 2 years ago or last year, and American sentiments on the economy are going to catch up with that, but it'll take some time. It will catch up, though. There's also the fact that Biden's opponent, Donald Trump, isn't doing himself any favors. First of all, he is in the midst of his criminal trial in New York right now. The country is being reminded about what a piece of shit he is on a daily basis. Stormy Daniels has given a detailed account of their affair and how he didn't care, for example, if Melania found out. Meanwhile, Trump, who refuses to even take the stand, just denies that they had an affair at all. So I wonder who the jury is going to believe here. So a criminal conviction may certainly be on the horizon. It looks like it will be. And polling from the latest Reuters Ipsos poll found that when registered voters were asked if they would vote for Trump if he was convicted of a felony, only 24% said yes, while 60% said no. Even among only Republicans, 24% said they wouldn't vote for him if convicted of a felony. That would be a massive defection. I mean, hell, even if that number ends up only being 5%, it would still be enough to tank Trump in November. At the same time, he keeps flirting with this idea of getting thrown into jail for violating his gag order, which I've mentioned numerous times that I really don't think he wants to do. But just humoring him, if he did, well then, one of the lasting images that voters would get before they head into the voting booth in November would be the Republican nominee literally sitting in a jail cell. And I'm not here to give campaign advice to Donald Trump, but can't see how that's going to expand his tent. And then, of course, there's the issue of abortion. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, they keep digging themselves deeper in this hole. Republican senator from Alabama and woman who may or may not have bodies in her basement, Katie Britt, is pushing a bill to launch a federal database to track pregnancies. Holy shit. Trump, meanwhile, just got on stage at his latest rally and said this.
So I want to just thank the 6 Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett for the wisdom and the courage they showed on this long-term, very contentious issue.
Literally thanked the 6 conservative justices for overturning Roe at his rally in public. So no, he's not going to escape this issue that has dogged Republicans, mostly because he himself refuses to stop congratulating himself on it. Dude has such an insatiable ego that even though the issue of abortion is crushing Republicans across the country, even in Ohio and Alabama and Kentucky and Virginia, Trump is so desperate for validation, for applause from his far-right rally crowds, that he'll keep reminding the rest of the country that he was responsible for what happened with Roe. Now, granted, it's not totally smooth sailing for Biden. There's still the issue of Israel that's hurting him with young voters and progressive voters. Inflation, as I mentioned before, is still being stubborn. And companies that are raking in record profits don't seem to want to relinquish any of that money. But Biden still has a little bit of time to get all of that stuff sorted. And in that time, Donald Trump is certain to continue mismanaging his legal issues and ramping up the threats against democracy and digging in his heels on brutally unpopular issues like abortion. But none of this is to make you complacent or make you think that we've got this in the bag, because we don't. And I mentioned at the top that we're still trailing in a bunch of must-win states. This is all to let you know that we are in an all-hands-on-deck moment right now. So here's what I would ask. 6 months out from Election Day, and this is always my advice, find 1 or 2 people who wouldn't normally vote and make them your responsibility. Here's my favorite stat. In Wisconsin in 2020, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden by 2 votes per precinct. That's all. That's all that separated a Biden win from a Trump win in the tipping point state. If everybody watching does their small part, I promise it'll have an impact. And I know that you've all got someone in your life who doesn't pay attention to politics or who doesn't vote, because my own sister recently asked me what a governor was. So if my sister is that blissfully unaware, then I know that we've all got people that we can work on. We are less than 6 months out here. Let's make sure that we can look back at this moment and know that when democracy was on the line, that we all did everything we could to protect it. Before we get to the interview with Leah, just a quick note. I have an announcement here. I'm writing a book. It's called Shameless. It's available right now for pre-sale. If you want to pre-order it, just go to briantylercohen.com/book, or you can click the link in the post description of this video. The book features interviews with like an all-star team: Pete Buttigieg, Jen Psaki, Al Franken, Mark Elias, Dan Pfeiffer, Mehdi Hassan, Heather Cox Richardson, and the foreword was written by Jamie Raskin. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I'd really love for you to read it. So again, if you'd like to pre-order, just go to briantylercohen.com/book or click the link in the post description. Here's a preview of my interview with Leah Litman. Do we have any indication as to when the Supreme Court may rule regarding this absurd question of presidential immunity? Because we've already passed some opinion days and we haven't heard anything. So my worry here is that they don't issue an opinion until the last possible moment by design. And of course, the longer we wait, the more of a delay that we have in the DC prosecution.
There's no indication about when they might rule, and you should believe anyone who tells you that an opinion is coming or is going to come on a particular date. Of course, there are some mile markers that we have in mind for the date by which they should probably issue an opinion if there is any hope of a pre-election trial. But other than that, we have no idea about when they might release an opinion. Other than that, by custom, they release opinion in argued cases by the end of June.
Even if we do get a decision at the end of the term, would there still be time then for Judge Chutkan, who's presiding over the D.C. trial, to schedule that trial before the 2024 election?
I think if they wait until the end of June to release an opinion, that would be really difficult to get a trial scheduled before the election, because Judge Chutkan had indicated she needed 80 some days of pretrial proceedings. Right, exactly. And so if it's end of June, then 88 kind of pushes it until well into the election and possibly after. Whereas if they released it at the end of May, then I think there is some possibility, depending on how they write the opinion, of a pre-election trial.
Well, as if we needed the added anxiety here, isn't it also possible that the Supreme Court could withhold the decision on this case until even the next term, meaning we wouldn't even have a decision by the end of June, which would be the last possible moment in this term?
That's possible, but extremely unlikely. It's very, very, very rare for the court to put off a decision in a case until the following term. Again, by custom, they release all the opinion in argued cases and, by the end of the term, which is, end of June. Now, they've done that in a small handful of cases, but usually under the auspices of requesting additional briefing or adding additional questions from the case. And it was clear from the argument in this case, they were just fine injecting the additional questions right into the case as it was. And so I guess I am not personally expecting them to delay it until the following term.
Okay. I mean, couldn't the argument be made that most of this is not what we expected anyway? I mean, for them to take up this question of presidential immunity for someone who's sitting in the Oval Office and committing criminal acts, that also seems unexpected in terms of them taking up in the first place when there was a perfectly reasonable, airtight justification with the lower courts.
I think, of course, this case is unprecedented and unusual in a lot of ways. Having a former president accused of multiple crimes, including the very serious crime of refusing to leave office and interfering with the peaceful transition of power, is unusual and unprecedented. That being said, I think the Supreme Court taking an important case that presents a novel, unprecedented question about the scope of former presidents' immunities from crimes after they leave office is not unusual. I think what is very concerning is that they waited to take this case until the last possible moment, rather than taking up special counsel Jack Smith's invitation to do so much earlier, like in December, before the DC Circuit had ruled. But again, I don't know that that signals that they would put off the decision until the following term rather than just delaying until the end of this term.
To watch the full interview with Leah, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also click the link on the screen for the audio version of this episode, and of course to see more of my content, the subscribe button's on the screen as well.